Hi, my name is Dawn, and I want to share an experience that I went through. I lost my vision, but when it came back, I was devastated. You might find it weird to hear someone who used to be blind complaining about seeing again. Well, if you hear me out, you'll understand why I say that. My story starts when I was 12 years old. My parents and I were driving out of town for my new baby cousin's christening. It was such an amazing day, and I had such a fun time seeing all my family whom I didn't normally see often. Plus, my mom and dad bought me this totally expensive and gorgeous dress. It was all purple, with sequins and sparkles, and it was super soft. I was really in love with it. The day was great and everyone was happy, but during the party after the christening, I went to find my mom and dad, and oh my God, they were standing outside and shouting at one another. It was so awkward and I felt so confused. Why were they fighting? I didn't want them to know I had seen them. So I ran away and hung around with my aunt and uncle for the rest of the day. When it was time to leave, my parents came and found me. They were both smiling, and it seemed like whatever was going on between them before was now over. I felt so relieved that everything was okay again. Then it happened. We were driving down the highway on our way home, and all of a sudden, bam! Another car slammed into the side of us. I don't really remember what happened very well. All I remember is that suddenly, my world went black. Apparently, another driver had merged into our lane without checking his mirrors and caused the accident. My parents and my doctor later told me I ended up in a coma for 2 weeks after the crash. Not that I remembered those weeks. When I finally did wake up, everything was still black. It was so strange. I kept blinking, but nothing appeared. It was like my eyes were staying closed even when they were wide open. I panicked and screamed. The doctors had to sedate me to get me to calm down. Eventually, after a lot of crying and confusion, I was ready to hear what was going on. The doctor told me that I had suffered a blow to my head, which had caused damage to my optic nerve, and meant I would have problems with my vision. Even then, they didn't expect me to totally lose my sight, but I did. My parents were devastated. I was devastated. It really, really sucked. Adjusting to my new world was hard. The world around me seemed the same in every way. I could still hear people talking. I could feel the bed I was sitting on. I could taste the jello I was given. But I saw none of it. All I saw was black. It was like the night sky was covering me all the time, except there were no stars. It was really scary at first. I had always been afraid of the dark as a child, and now darkness was my entire world. There was no nightlight I could turn on. When I left the house, I could feel the sunlight on my skin, but I couldn't see it anymore. I was sad for a really long time about it. I think it was worse for me than people who were born blind, because I knew what I was missing out on. At night, I would dream that I could see again. I would see all the beautiful flowers in the garden in their different colors. Red, blue, purple. I would see the bright blue sky. I'd be able to put on a new dress and admire it without having to ask my mom what color it was. My life changed in other ways, too. I was sent away from my school to somewhere else, somewhere that had teachers with special training and extra equipment to help me learn. I was taught this funny way of reading with my fingers. Mrs. Epsom called it Braille, but really it was just bumps on a piece of plastic that meant different letters. The only upside to everything was that my parents finally let me get a dog. It was a specially trained golden retriever who could help me move around outside the house without my parents. Not that they would let me do that very often. I named him Riley, and I never went anywhere without him. I spent the next 4 years trying to make the most of my life. I'd never have to think about it before, but it turned out that being blind didn't totally hold me back much. Once I got the hang of Braille and began using Riley to get around outside, I started to get back to enjoying my life again. I made new friends at my new school, and life seemed kinda normal, at least as normal as it could be. Then, everything changed again. My doctor told my parents they could try some experimental new surgery that might restore my eyesight. I couldn't believe it. After 4 years, I'd gotten used to not seeing, but that didn't mean I wouldn't take my sight back in a heartbeat. So I told my parents I wanted to try it, and they agreed. They wanted to do anything to help me. A few months later, I was back in the hospital and ready for surgery. It was super scary. I was worried the entire time that I hadn't done the right thing. What if something went wrong? What if I got my hopes up and it was all for nothing? My mind was racing with terrible thoughts, but I tried to ignore them. I went under, and then all of a sudden, I was waking up again. Instead of darkness, I was surrounded by blinding white light. At first, it was almost too much. I was so overwhelmed that I threw my hands over my eyes to try to block it out. It was giving me a headache. Everything was so bright now. My parents were worried about my reaction, but the doctor gave me an eye mask and said it was normal for things to be too much at first. So they took me home and sat me in the living room, where I tried to take the mask off. My parents left me alone so I could do it at my own pace, with no pressure. This time, everything wasn't quite so bright. My parents had drawn the curtains and left the lights off to give me time to adjust. All I could see were shadows at first in the dim light, but slowly, everything began to take shape. I could see the fireplace in my living room for the first time in years. I cried with happiness. I couldn't help it. The surgery had worked. I had never been so overjoyed in my entire life. But as I calmed down a little, I noticed something. The living room was practically empty. All of my mom's antique collectibles that she'd kept on the mantel above the fireplace were gone. The paintings on the wall were missing too. Feeling confused, I turned my head from left to right, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Then it hit me. They must have sold them. They must have sold things to pay for my surgery. I went into the kitchen to find them and asked them what had happened. But when I got there, I didn't think that they were my parents. I didn't recognize them at all. My mom was thin as a rake and my dad's eyes were black underneath from tiredness. Just how hard they had worked themselves. All for my sake? They told me that it wasn't just the surgery that was expensive. The tuition for my new school had cost them a lot, and so had my constant doctor's appointments. They had to buy books in Braille for me, and the seeing eye dog was pricey too. They had taken out a loan to cover my surgery, and would be working long hours and double shifts to pay for it. I wanted to cry again, but not from happiness this time, from guilt. I couldn't believe I had caused my parents so much pain. So I decided right then and there that I would make it up to them. I resolved to get my own part-time Saturday job as soon as my sight settled, and that's exactly what I did. The local grocery store interviewed me, and I was due for my first shift last Saturday. But when I turned up, they told me I wasn't going to be able to start. Apparently, my dad had called and told them he'd forbidden me from working there. I was more confused than ever before. Why would he do that when it meant I could help with our family's money problems? When I got home, I confronted my dad about it, and instead of being angry, he started crying. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen my dad actually cry before. He confessed to me that on the day of the accident, he'd had one drink, a whiskey and a Coke, after his argument with my mom. He blamed himself for the accident all these years. He thought if he hadn't had that drink, he could have swerved out of the way to avoid the other driver, or done something to help me from getting hurt. I couldn't believe he'd had these feelings all these years. I hugged him close and told him that it wasn't his fault at all. It was an accident, and accidents happen. The other driver was deemed at fault by the police, and even if it was his fault, I'd forgive him because we're family. He calmed down a little after that, and finally agreed to let me work and help pay off the loan. It all worked out for the best, really. I enjoyed working in the grocery store and speaking to new people every day, and the little extra income meant my mom and dad could both take Sundays off. So Sunday became family day, and we spent it together every week to remind ourselves how lucky we are to have one another. Looking back at things now made me realize how lucky I am for having a family that supported me throughout that phase of my life. And to be honest, I can't say that I wish things took a different direction, because I owe my new self to this incident. I became a stronger person and stopped taking things for granted as I used to in the past. I also learned to appreciate the small things in life, as sometimes they make all the difference. I guess that sometimes we only realize the worth of what we have the moment we lose it. That's why my parents and I decided to start a foundation for blind people. Its aim is taking care of the needs of blind people and their parents. This way, we can ensure that the whole family will learn how to adapt to the situation together and go through the adjusting process as one unity. At the end of the day, a family should stick together no matter what, and work together to solve any problems, as we did. Thanks for listening to my story. What did you think of it? Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Hi, my name is Dawn, and I want to share an experience that I went through. I lost my vision, but when it came back, I was devastated. You might find it weird to hear someone who used to be blind complaining about seeing again. Well, if you hear me out, you'll understand why I say